All right. Well, it is 6:01 so we will go ahead and get started here. Um, so again, first time here, first of the first timers clinics that you're listening to or tuning in on. Gillian. I'm Gillian. I'm one of the coaches for the First Timers program. So welcome, and we are now what, 5 weeks or so away, I guess, from the big day. So I hope everybody's having a good summer and good training. So this is our fifth clinic. We've done triathlon 101, swimming, biking, running, and now we're going to be talking about everything about transitions. The last clinic will just be going over race day, answering any specific questions you might have, really anything, but really just going through what does race weekend look like? What do you need to think about in that last week before the race? But yeah, so with that, we'll kick it off. And again, as always, this is meant to be athlete driven. So if you have any questions, whether they're about transitions or not, just go ahead and pop them into the chat and I will try to answer them as we go along. So transitions 101. So when we talk about transitions, that's going from one sport to the other. So again, being fairly deep into training, I'm sure you know by now that triathlons go swim, bike, run. So there are two transitions and they're called T1 and T2. T1 is the transition from swim to bike, and T2 is the transition from bike to run. So, and I've mentioned this in the previous webinars, but when you get your time for the end of, once you cross the finish line at the end of the race, you're going to have a time for your swim. You're going to have a T1 time. So it's going to tell you, it'll say it took 7 minutes for you to go from the swim to the bike. You'll have a bike time, a T2 time, and then a run time. And just as a reminder, the T1 for the Chicago Triathlon, one unique thing, and if this is news to you, go back and watch the swim video, but there is a 450-ish meter walk run once you get out of the water to transition. So, and that is included in your transition time, not your swim time, just as a little fact. And oftentimes in triathlons, we call transition their own sport because they are. They're just as fun as swimming, biking, and running. So this is the Saturday race. If you are doing the super sprint, this orange box right here is going to be the transition area for you. Swim is at Foster Beach. The bike, as we talked about, is on this like inner Foster Avenue road, and then the run is on the lakefront path. So you're gonna come in from the swim if you just follow the orange arrow up on the top east corner of transition. You're gonna go to leave transition. It's actually going to be on the the northwest corner. So up where this 180 turnaround is, and then you'll come back in the same place, and then you'll go out for the run on this southeast corner. As I've said before, all of this, when you're there, they are going to have big arches that say bike out, bike in, run out. So you're not going to be like, there's not going to be any question as to where you're going to go, and a lot of volunteers. So that's the Saturday race, super sprint transition. This is a kind of an overview map of Sunday's races. So whether you're doing the international or the sprint, the transition area is the same. Let me just skip to the next one real quick. So this is a zoomed in picture of the transition area. So though you're in the same place, it will be blocked off. So they'll have fencing that blocks off international and sprint, just so that, if you're doing international, people aren't rocking their bikes and you're running out. So it just keeps the flow of traffic. All of the lines indicate racks. This is not a perfect picture. It may not look exactly like this, but just so you can kind of see how big and transition is. If you look down on this first row here, you'll see first timers written. And that is one of the benefits of being in the first timers program is you're not, the rack for the first timers is not going to be in the middle, of the group. You're not, which is going to make it a lot easier to find your spot. I'm going to show a video in a second, and it'll make sense why it can sometimes be difficult how to find your spot. And then we'll talk about some tips for that in a little bit. But one of the benefits if you stay in the first timers program, because we have talked about, you do have the option, up for another couple of weeks or so if you want to switch out to the age group. But one of the benefits is a very good rack position where you're not gonna, it's gonna be very easy to find your bike. But going back here, so for transition, you have two different options about when you want to bring your bike. And we're going to talk about bike only right now. You can either bring it on Saturday, and these times are from last year, but it will be something close to that, on Saturday between 2 and 6 p.m. So what you will have done is everybody has to go to the expo. You have to go to the expo to get your packet. Nobody else can pick it up for you. Around triathlons, you have to be there. You have to pick up your own packet. So you have to go down there. In order to pick up your packets, you have to have attended a course talk. And so I hope these are very informative. These do not count as course talks. So you will have to go to one of the official course talks, which actually are incredibly helpful. There 3 years ago, 2 years ago, they said people don't have to go to the course talk, and I will say it was quite chaotic on race day. So they are actually helpful. So you go to course talk, you'll get a wristband, then you'll be able to pick up your packet. Once you've done that, in your packet are going to be a bunch of stickers, and they will tell you where to put them. Some of them will go on your bike, some will go on your helmet. And once you've stickered your bike, you have the option of putting your bike in transition on Saturday between 2 and 6 p.m. And again, I think I've mentioned this before, but why would you do this? One, if it's just easier to not have your bike with you early in the morning at whatever, 5 a.m., 6 a.m., any of those times, and you don't want to worry about it, put it in there. Another benefit, and even if you don't rack your bike, I highly recommend just taking a little walk over to transition on Saturday, because you can, as long as you have your numbers and everything, you can go into transition. It'll only be you, nobody else, your family, friends can't go in, but you can kind of get a lay of the land when it's light out. Because again, remembering, as you can see here, race day early racking for the international distance is usually between 4 a.m. and 5:45 a.m. So it's not going to be light out by that point. If you're the later, so the sprint distance of 6:30 to 8 a.m., you might have light. But that's one other thing that you might consider is just walking over to transition to see it. You'll also be able to see where the swim start is and all of that. So you can either rack your bike, like I said, Saturday, or you can bring it with you Sunday morning. Obviously, you will need it for the race. If you do rack your bike on Saturday, you cannot leave anything else, only your bike. So no bags, no helmets or anything like that, just your bikes. And there is security that will be there all overnight. Plus they are there, setting up anyway. So there are tons of people, but they have dedicated security, not letting anybody into transition. So that's kind of the situation there. A couple of these arrows, as if you are the early morning, so international, or you're just getting there early as a sprint distance, most people will come, there's lots of parking at the Millennium Park garages. You can buy discounted parking, I think, right now, but if you don't, it will be available the morning of. But you can take Monroe Street over, you can take Randolph Street over. If you're in the Millennium Park garages, I tend to think Monroe is kind of the best way to walk over. because then you go right into where the international distance of the transition is. Randolph gets a little, can be, because you have to go on like through the Randolph Park. And again, they'll talk more about this at that race day at the expo of exactly where you go. But international, you can come into transition either way. If you're doing the sprint, you can only enter transition during this later period on this top east corner of transition. And so you either have to take Randolph to get there, or you can, take Monroe. You just have to cross over the course, which can get really congested. And then go on like the outside close to the lake and up and around. But I would highly recommend just walking across on the upper Randolph. You'll see a lot of other people walking that way, so it'll make sense. And they'll have lots of maps again at the expo how to get there. But that is, so that's kind of a little logistical stuff. Pop over to the questions real quick. So one of the questions is on Saturday's race, can you enter transition? So this is going to be your super sprint anywhere, regardless of the of your race distance. And so the only races that are in transition here is you do have the kids race. They will be racked on the west side. So just think of like a line down the middle of this box. They'll be on the west side. Super sprint is on the east side. So you're going to actually, they have the entrance. It's kind of over on the east side of transition, is how you'll get in. So you won't go in where the kids go. You kind of have to go up and around, and you can enter on the east side. But I will say this will, on Saturday, it'll be really well marked, and you'll see exactly, it'll say sprint entrance versus the kids entrance. Oh, sorry. Sorry. So yes, so the question is Saturday racking for the Sunday's race. Can you enter either entrance? I would definitely go. Great question, and I would double check at the expo, but I'm pretty sure maybe that the only entrance is on the southwest side right here. I think that is the only entrance open on Saturday. It might not be entirely true, but I know that one is open. I just don't know about this top east corner, but I feel like they might want to kind of close that off. So, but again, you will have gone to the expos. So that's definitely a good question. If for some reason, the Randolph is more convenient. So sorry, I don't have a better answer to that. Let's see, and I will, so kind of just taking a quick pause because I just want to not forget this. A great question is along the course, so not necessarily transition related, along the course, are there distance markers? And the answer is yes, there are distance markers along the course. The swim, no, there aren't going to be distance markers. The only markers in the swim are going to be the boats on the side. There's going to be a buoy if you're doing international down by the aquarium that you have to turn around, and then you'll see a big orange arch at the swim exit that you'll be able to see from in the water, and you'll know that that's the swim exit. Now the swim exit, you have to come up on the shore. So I'm swimming, and then you have to kind of turn and go up on the shore. So just one thing to think about is when you're doing the swim, so that's going to be down by this V, kind of where this square is right here. Best to kind of like go up and then take a turn in. You don't necessarily want to like diagonal to the corner of the swim exit, because a lot of people do that. So just make sure you swim far enough up so you can kind of take a turn and come in head on versus diagonal. Just because it gets very congested, and I wouldn't want anybody to get stuck in the congestion. Okay, so let's see. So that's so transition. Okay. For Sunday's race, so like I said, you can rack early or you rack the morning up. In a few minutes, I'm going to talk about everything about racking your bike, but this is more geographical, so you can understand it. So you're gonna, if we look down on the southeast of this picture, you're going to see this is where the swim in is. So you're going to come in, whether you're doing the swim out, swim in, bike out is all the same, regardless of whether you do the international or the sprint distance. So swim in down here on the south west corner. So yes, in some things, so like the sprint's going to be a farther walk run, but when you're coming on the bike, it's going to be shorter. So it all evens out. Swim in, bike out is up in this top northwest corner. So as we do, but you're going to come up here, you're going to hit the bridge, the Randolph Street Bridge up to Lakeshore Drive. So again, just reminding you to have your bike in a gear that's not super heavy because you hit a kind of incline right away. You'll do your bike, and then you're going to bike back in the same place that you bike out. Big wide opening. It won't be congested. Big arches that tell you where to come in and out of. Again, when you're biking in and out, we have the mount line and the dismount line. So you can't get on your bike until you're past the mount line, and you have to get off your bike before the dismount line. So that's the bike in, bike out. And then we have the run out down here, again, on the southwest side. Usually they have water here in the middle. Again, I would not count on the water to fill up your 5 water bottles, and more so for if you need a drink while in transition or to top something off, because the amount of water, just always depends. We look over on the west side, so you can see the bike tech tents. So you get there in the morning and somehow you rack your bike, and somehow you end up with a flat tire. Go straight to the bike tech tent. They will help you. Medical. If anybody's doing the relay tent is down here on the southwest side. And then I think we've also talked about if you happen to get a penalty, the penalty tent's going to be like a little bit outside the transition on the run course. So that's kind of the lay of the land. So I'm going to go through some stuff because I'm going to get deep into what you do in transition. And then hopefully I answer any questions. But if there's any questions about the geographics of transition, pop them in there. Okay, let's go. Let's see. Okay. All right. Let's see. Okay, I'm gonna pop in the kind of a side here for anybody that doesn't have the video link. Popped it back in the chat, so you can have that. All right. I see a question about transitions and the where you put your bike. I will get to that, I promise, in 2 seconds here. So, course map of what we're going to talk about. All you need is a little grit. Get ready, have a checklist. That's what we're going to talk about first. And then practice transitions, much like you're training everything else. Training the transitions is a really good idea. And we'll talk more about that. Race day, just initiating the plan, trusting that you have done this, you've practiced it, you had your checklist, and you're good. And the big key to today is less is more. And then time to shine and just sticking to your plan because you've practiced it, you're ready. So that's what we're going to talk about here. So how it works. All right, let's short 2-minute video here.
Trans-America Chicago Triathlon, the transition area. Occupying over 5 acres, the Chicago Triathlon transition area is truly a sight to behold. When you first witness the sea of bikes and people, a swirling beehive of activity, it can be a bit intimidating. But rest assured, no transition area is more carefully thought out, laid out, and well organized than Chicago's.
I describe it as a controlled chaos.
And it is one of the world's largest transition areas.
Think of the transition area as a massive, fully secured, outdoor, co-ed locker room where participants store their bike and run gear for quick access during the race. There are hundreds of racks, but they are clearly divided into sprint and international distance areas. Rack assignments are also designed for fairness, grouping participants by gender, age range, and athletic ability.
You've got all the distances, sprint, Olympic, everyone together. And it's neat. You got the backdrop of the skyline right behind you. It's fun. It's fun. It makes the sport very unique.
Athletes have the option to rack their bikes either Saturday afternoon or early Sunday morning, but we recommend the Saturday option, allowing you to familiarize yourself with the landscape during daylight hours. See our website for a detailed map, along with very clear instructions on how to find your spot, lay out your gear, and navigate both Transition 1 and 2 during the race. A few helpful tips to make your transition experience a success. Whether you rack your bike Saturday or Sunday, all participants must return to transition early Sunday morning to set up their gear for the race. Don't forget to pump up your bike tires on race morning. Bike mechanics are available, but they will be very busy. Leave those large signs and balloons at home. All obstructive items used to help identify your racks will be removed by event staff because they can impede visibility of directional signs. The transition area is fully secured by Chicago Police and private security. Only registered participants and event staff are allowed inside. Once finished, you'll be allowed to re-enter transition and retrieve your gear on a flow schedule. This is important as we don't want to impede other athletes who are still racing. The transition area is truly the heart of the Chicago Triathlon experience. Carefully laid out with clear instructions for what you need to do, it's another reason you will love your Chicago Triathlon race experience.
So I mean, older video, but I think it's really helpful to see it if you've never been down, if you've never spectated the Chicago Triathlon, what it looks like and what to kind of expect. As the if I can zoom out here a little bit. Okay, as the video talked about, first picture I had of the kind of the orange box with all the lines, there are going to be hundreds of racks, but they are assigned to specific waves. So if you're in the first timers wave and you are going to have a set of racks that are going to be specifically allocated to the first timers. And how will you know that? At the end of the rack, there is going to be a big sign that one, it will say first timers, and two, it will have a number. So like 1,000 to 1,050. And if your number falls within 1,000 to 1,050, that is your rack for your bike. So that's how you're going to know where to go. Like I said, first timers are going to have a good position. Almost always it's that first, second, right kind of at the bottom of transition. If you're not in the first timers official wave, then you're going to be either with your age group, your charity, whatever other group you are in. And so what you're going to look for is the sign that says wave 37 and then has a set of numbers. So you'll know what wave you're in. We'll get that probably 2 weeks ahead of race day. So that's the rack you need to rack your bike on. Once you find your rack, and I'm gonna, let's see if I can zoom into this picture a little bit, and a little bit hard to see, but you are going to rack your bike by the seat. So what you're going to hook your bike onto the pole, and what that will do is then your front wheel will be facing down and your rear wheel will be up in the air. And the bikes are going to alternate. So yours will face one way, your neighbor's bike will face the other way. So your front wheels alternate on the side that they're down. So you can kind of see like wheel up, wheel down, wheel up, wheel down. So when you get there in the morning, if there are people already there before you, you'll find a spot, find a space. It doesn't matter, it's not numerical or anything like that. You just need to be on that set of racks. You look at the bike next to you, and whatever way that's facing, you'll go the opposite direction. Now, if you happen to be tall, and your bike does not, you can't, the seat is so high that it can't fit onto the you can't hook your seat onto the rack. You can rack your bike by your handlebars. So instead of just racking your seat, you put your handlebars. But same thing. You want whatever your real rear wheel will be down. You still want to alternate with the person next to you. But once you see it, it will make more sense. So that's how you're going to rack your bike. So I'm going to go back for a second here if I can figure out how to move this box. Okay. So the first thing is, though, that we want to talk about is getting ready. So having a checklist. Have a checklist starting now of what you're going to need on race morning. So we have we have one picture of a transition here with probably about all you need, maybe pretty minimalist. And then we have a picture of way too much stuff, and that you're not going to be able to find anything that you're looking for on race morning. And the big thing that I say is, if you have not used it during training, you are not going to need it during the race. So just thinking about that when you're coming up with your checklist, packing your bag, it's, I'm just thinking of like when I travel, it's like all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I might need to wear this shirt that I haven't worn in 3 years. No, you do not. So right here we have, some ideas of what a checklist might look like. So for the swim, timing chip, you absolutely need that. Goggles, swim cap, whatever you're wearing, your wetsuit. And actually for the swim, that's all the stuff that needs to go with you down to the swim start. So you're not leaving your swim stuff in transition. You go in the morning of, and now you're setting up for the bike and the run, but taking everything you need for the swim with you. For the bike, helmets, absolutely. Shoes, yes. Sunglasses if you're going to wear them. We have shirt on here in the sense that if you're, so I've talked about in the past, like my go-to is swimming in triathlon shorts and a sports bra and putting my wetsuit over, and then putting on, like a tank top or whatever it is when I get to my bike. So shirts, nutrition, socks if you're going to wear them. For the run, shoes, your bib. Remember we talked about, you do have to wear your number on the front for the run only. Again, sunglasses, nutrition, socks, race belt. And I'll show a picture of that again. That's that thing you'll see at the expo. That's just an easy way to snap on your race bib for the run only versus having to safety pin it or wear it for the bike. And the benefit is a lot of these race belts have places for your nutrition as well. And then we have the miscellaneous, which I actually think these are the things you usually forget. So like an extra set of contacts. If I was to lose my contacts, I would not be finishing the race. So I always bring an extra pair of contacts. If you're in earplugs for a swimmer, hair ties, super important. I had long hair for a very long time, and there is nothing worse than your hair tie snapping while you're putting your helmet on or whatever it is. So important. Sunscreen, also very important. So this is just kind of a good example of what it might need. But then after that, actually, a couple things that aren't on here, but let me go to the next slide before I start talking about that. But that's the sports stuff that you might need. Let's see. I can get this over. All right. So I'm actually going to skip. I'm going out of the order of the grit because I want to actually get to. Okay. So like we talked about, where do you set up? You rack your bike by the seat if possible. And 99% of people are going to be, it's just if you happen to have a very tall bike that you're not going to be able to do that. Where do you put your stuff? So this is always, people do things very differently, and some of where you put your stuff is going to be dictated by what's going on around you. But the ideal situation is that you set up your stuff on the side where your front wheel is. So actually the one bike I'm looking at here has the rear wheel, but looking at your bike, you're going to set up on the side of your front wheel. And if you're looking at your bike, to the right of your front wheel. So your stuff is going to be right next to your front wheel, and it will be underneath the rear wheel of your neighbor's bike. So that's where you're going to set up your stuff. Now, if you get there and people have gone astray and they're set up to the left side or something, that's fine. This is not a rule. It's just trying to get everybody on the same page so things line up correctly. The other thing is making sure, this is another reason why you don't want to bring too much stuff, because you have enough room, you don't have a ton of room. So you don't want to be spilling into everybody else's space. So trying to keep your stuff to a, towel sized, kind of like a hand towel sized space. So these are, so when you do go to set up, what you think about is, how can I set up to not forget anything that I need? So not to get out on the bike and be like, oh no, I don't have my water bottle, or I don't have my shoes, whatever it is. So you realize that ahead of time, but you never know. So there's two different pictures here. I tend to go towards what this picture shows. And as you can see, now this bike is on the end, which gives them a little bit more liberty to take up that in slot with their stuff. And as you can see, it's on the left side of the bike, so it does not go along with what I just told you. But how they've set up is, you come out of the swim, you're going to start from the top, taking your goggles off, then taking your swim cap off. This is actually the point that once you get your swim cap and goggles off, I put my helmet on right away. So as we talked about, one of the penalties that they do have, and it's just the safety thing, is that you can't be touching your bike without your helmet on and strapped. So as soon as I take my goggle and swim cap on, I put my helmet on right away so I can't forget it. And then they have their bike shoes. If I wear socks, so I put my socks in each shoe, one in each of them. And then I'm going to put my shoes on, socks and shoes on. And then, here they have some like nutrition or whatever it is, sunglasses. So popping those on. And then once you get to the run stuff, I have everything I need now for the bike. Good question that gets asked a lot is, what do I then do with my swim stuff? You put it as close to where your stuff, you put it on the mat, kind of taking up where your bike stuff is, so that it's so that it's close to your stuff. And then, when you come back from the bike, so you come back in, you rack your bike in the exact same place, or try to get it as close to your stuff as possible. And then you kind of move on to the next line of stuff, which is your run stuff. So here you have your running shoes, hydration belt or race number belt, hat, whatever else that you need. Great question coming is, I haven't been training with bike shoes. Do I need them? No, absolutely not. You do not need bike shoes. And if you're not wearing bike shoes, then this cuts down on the stuff you need. Your run shoes would be where your bike shoes are. You absolutely do not need bike shoes. In the bike clinic, we talked about the benefit of them, but don't even, if you're not training with them now, don't even worry about it. When you love triathlons, you can decide to do it next year. Here you can see the bag. So whatever you bring your stuff in, just putting it in line with your stuff. They will also give you a clear bag if you want to bring that, into transition, but bags are allowed. Just as a side, because I know that's a big thing that changes often, and that could change. But for now, bags are allowed. Question about hydration vests. Are they okay? Absolutely. Totally fine. And they won't impact your number, your bib. So that's what I talked about, though, is if race belt is a good way to have, your number around your waist, but also, just make sure your bib the number is somewhat visible on the front, and you'll be fine. But like the one strap across, you'll be fine. So this other picture is kind of a different take, kind of like the opposite. I like going like first, second. This is kind of splitting it the other way. So they have their bike stuff on one side, their run stuff on the other side. So just kind of a different take of how to lay your stuff out. Also things just to think about. Like for example, I mean, these are little things and you know, I wouldn't get too concerned with the details, but also transitions is where you can easily like save, you know, some time. So like your helmet, you know, having it unbuckled. I would stay away from hanging your helmet on your bike. Lots of people in there, somebody knocks it, goes flying, and then you have to, you know, then it's like, where's Waldo? Finding your helmet. So, you know, best thing, I actually often put my helmet in between my shoes, kind of as like a cradle, just making it harder for it to roll off anywhere. But that's just something I like to do. Your running shoes, have them untied or have the quick ties. So you're not getting out of the water with cold hands, or hopefully not cold hands, trying to untie your shoes. Just doing everything you can to make you not have to think about what you're doing once you get to transition. And then trying to zoom back out here. Oh, oh no. Okay. There we go. So race day. So walking through transition, like we talked about, one is practicing. And taking, you know, a day that maybe it's kind of one of your more off days or whatever, to do, you know, to practice, actually practice the transition. Maybe you're down at the beach, coming out of the water, having your stuff set up to go through the bike, or, you know, at the pool, you know, and even if it's just practicing it. And I know that sounds silly, you know, you're like, I'm gonna bring my bike shoes to the pool. But I promise you there'll be other people doing it there. And it really just gives you an idea of like, you know, just what it's like to go from one to the other. So practicing that. The other thing that, and I think the video mentioned this, back in the early days of triathlons, people would bring buckets and balloons and things like that. You can't do that, and you don't need to. I mean, it's, but one thing that is good if you can come up with it is, you're gonna have your space, and it's, you know, and most bikes look similar, unless you have some crazy unique color of a bike. So I'm thinking of, you're gonna want to have some kind of towel to put your stuff on. Yes, they do make triathlons mats, but I would say a towel works perfectly great as well. But coming up, you know, getting a bright colored one, or something with some unique pattern to you, you know, thinking that everybody's face is going to look kind of alike, and thinking about what is something that would catch your eye, to at least like you get in the general vicinity, and then you're like, oh, there's my, you know, fluorescent orange towel. And that's just helpful. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in a second, I think. Hold on, let me go to the next. Actually, one other thing I wanted to say about this. So we talked about before also that transitions are a great place to hydrate and to get nutrition. So having those, making sure you have an extra water bottle just in transition to hydrate. I also like to have an extra water bottle to squirt on my feet, especially if it's, you know, been a rainy time and it's muddy or something like that. So, you know, just having an extra water bottle or two in transition is always a good idea. So thinking about that, and then thinking about, you know, do you have some kind of nutrition specifically in transition? So like this, you know, there's a banana or whatever it is. That's a good idea. But like I said, people used to bring buckets to like rinse their feet and things like that. Don't worry about that. The other thing that was mentioned in the video is pumping up your tires. And the question I often get is, should I bring a bike pump? If you've pumped up your tires the day before, you're going to be okay. And the problem with the bike pump is just, one, that they're big and you have to carry it, and two, you're probably not getting it back, because they become a very hot commodity, which is great and fine. But so the two things I'd say is pump your bike up the morning of at home if you're not racking on Saturday. On Saturday, if you pumped your bike up that right before you went in, unless there's some crazy temperature change, you're going to be okay because you figure it's barely going to be 12 hours. But you definitely can bring a pump if you want. The hand pumps are great, but unless you have like a high PSI one, it's gonna be really hard. I mean, those are better for like getting you from point A to point B. So if you have one, great, but I also wouldn't necessarily say you need to run out and get one. Worst case scenario, there are the bike techs. Again, it's going to be crazy, so don't rely on that, but it is a last resort kind of thing. So then initiating the plan, race day, what does this all mean? So you've gotten your checklist, you've practiced it. First thing, get there early. Do you have to get there right when transition opens? No. But say transition closes at 5:45, I would not recommend showing up at 5. I would say no later than 5:15. One, the walk from wherever you parked to transition, for some reason, always feels longer than I anticipate. So you want to make sure there's more than enough time for that. If for whatever reason there's something with parking that goes on, you just want to build in time for that. And then 2, just so you don't feel, and then I guess it's like 3, but you don't want to feel rushed when you're in there, because when 5:45 or and I'm blanking right off the top of my head what time for the sprint it closes. Usually it is. I'm blanking on what time that is. Transition closes at 8 a.m. for the sprint. When 5:45 or 8 a.m. come, that is it. There's nobody else in. It is, you have to be out of transition at that point. So having more than enough time to get comfortable and have your stuff set up. So getting there early, looking for landmarks. So what does this mean? As far as rack your bike and then look around and see, is there something that will kind of remind you where your bike is? Again, it's going to be a little bit easier if you're in the first timers program because it's going to be a good, easy to find rack. But still, is there a tree? Are you next to the water station? Whatever. Are you 3 racks in from the swim in and 4 racks in from the bike in, or whatever it is? But knowing, having landmarks, so when you come in and you're a little tired, you can at least get in the vicinity of where your bike is, and then you'll look for your, red or yellow towel, and you'll find your stuff. And then biggest thing then is to stick to the plan. That's what we said. Don't bring a lot of stuff that you've never used and just you think maybe, I'll need, I can't even think of something creative at this moment, but some random thing. You're not going to need it if you haven't needed it before. So sticking to your plan and knowing what what you're going to be doing. So great question. The question is so we talked about it's about racking your bike and your stuff and whether you bring it Saturday or Sunday. So you can rack your bike only on Saturday. Everything else, so that's you have to bring on Sunday. So even if you rack your bike on Saturday, you still have to come back during that transition period and set up your stuff. It's just that you wouldn't have had to bring your bike down that morning. If that makes sense. So nothing else, can be on your bike other than your bike itself. Hopefully that, is clear. All right, so there's that question. So you bring your swim stuff, the rest of your bike stuff, the run stuff, all of that. And again, just a reminder, you can't lock your bike on if you do it on Saturday either. And during the race, you can't lock your bike. They will have security that's there. Nobody's allowed in transition other than the athletes and the race staff. So I totally got off track on the grit, but we initiated the plan, and then I believe it's our time to shine. So a little bit redundant here, but nothing new. You will have practiced this. You will have trained this. It is the 4th sport. taking your time. And I'm sure I've told this story, but it's the best go-to story of taking your time. If you've watched the real life Rashawn puts on a wetsuit video, that's on the Facebook group, or I'm happy to send it to anybody. Or it's on there's also a Live Great YouTube channel that has a bunch of random stuff for the last 10 years, but you can check that. It's whatever. Real life Rashawn puts on a wetsuit. Rashawn, he did the Chicago Triathlon. He was wearing wetsuit shorts, so basically just the short part of the wetsuit, and he was like hurrying, and he forgot to take his wetsuit shorts off, so he had to do the whole international bike in wetsuit shorts. And he said it's the most uncomfortable bike he's ever had. But so taking your time, you would rather take an extra 30 minute and a half, 3 minutes, whatever it is, to make sure you have everything, you've hydrated, you've put on sunscreen, and then go out, than to get out on the bike and realize, you forgot your sunglasses and it's a really sunny day, or, you forgot your water bottle. So taking your time and then going with the flow. So sometimes things do just happen. I can't tell you, I think you've been looking, I run a youth program. We had a young guy who, tried kids triathlon, and he got his shoes, so he did the whole run. He came running across the finish line, and he was booking it in basically flip flops. You've seen many people on the bike on flip flops. Not ideal, but go with the flow. You can make it work if something doesn't go as planned. And that's all the fun of triathlons, is nothing ever goes quite like you think. So let me get to some of the questions. So got some questions about wetsuits, which I love. The water is definitely cold enough for wetsuits. In the years that I have done, but I hate saying this because some weird things have happened, in the last couple of years, but wetsuits have never been illegal at the Chicago Triathlon, and they would be quote unquote illegal if the temperature is too high. And I was just looking at what the Super Tri's temperature. I'm sorry, I was just pulling this up. Temperature gauge. So let me just pull this up real quick. I know I talked about this last time, but I just want to make sure I get it right. So if the temperature is 78.1 degrees or above, wetsuits are not allowed. If it's 78 degrees or lower, they are allowed. It has never been, you've never not been able to wear a wetsuit. So yes, you will be totally fine. August comes to, it'll be totally fine. Unless something totally crazy happens. But like I said, it usually, doesn't. And they want people to wear wetsuits. If you want to wear a wetsuit, they want people to wear a wetsuit. So, so they're gonna push that to the limit, because like myself, a wetsuit just makes me feel more comfortable. Some people not interested, don't need that comfort, totally understand. But for me, I would dread a race that's not wetsuit legal, but swimming is not my forte. So do most people wear contacts glasses, just wear contacts for the swim? So I have, for the last years, worn contacts for the swim. It's totally fine. If you swim in contacts and that's what you've trained in, totally fine. If you have glasses and don't wear contacts, there is a table at the swim out. That's the special, table that you can put your glasses on and then pick them up when you get out of the water. But yes, wearing contacts is totally fine if you wear contacts. Let's see. How far apart are the aid stations on the run route? They're usually a mile apart. So I think the sprint has 2, like a mile in and then at the turnaround. And the international has 3, I think, but it's every mile are those. Anyway, I'm just gonna pop on my earphones. There's died. So hopefully you can still hear me, but if you can't, somebody type it in the chat that you can't hear me. So about a mile apart on the run is what it is. And in the water and Gatorade endurance is what's on the run. And actually, I think, let me, well, I don't have a map, but if you go to the map of the run, you'll see where they are for the 2 distances. That makes sense. Okay. Let's see. Race morning. Okay, so the question is, for race morning, can you put your water bottles in your bottle cages on the bike before the race starts, or do they have to be on your towel? Absolutely. Put them on your bike, 100%. Have them ready to go. I would have them in there. Great question. Yeah, put them on your bike. But then maybe have an extra one on your towel. That was, yeah, great question. Yeah, so all right, I'm wrapping up here. So if you have any last minute questions, let me know. I realized one thing I didn't talk about, kind of going back to the start of the race, is so you'll go in, put your bike and run stuff down, and then you're taking your swim stuff with you to the swim start. At the expo, you are also going to get a plastic bag. You're gonna get like 2, maybe 3 plastic bags, actually. And one of them is for is the swim start bag. If there's anything that you want to be taken from the swim start to the finish line, you can put that in the bag. Because as we've talked about in previous clinics, and if you go back to the map, the finish line is not the transition area. That's actually a little bit of a distance. It is walkable. There will also be trolleys, but once you cross the finish line, you're not going to be right at transition. So if there's something you want, or for example, if it's a chillier morning and you wear a long sleeve shirt or something for the time before you get in the water, you can put that in your finish line bag, and you'll put a number on the bag, and then it will end up at the finish line area. But what you'll want to make sure and flip-flops, things like that. You can put those in the bag. I know that, sometimes people save up like old flip-flops, old shirts or whatever it is, because you can also just leave, they'll have places where you can just leave them and then they donate the like leftover flip-flops and stuff like that, if you don't care to have them back. But I just wanted to mention that. So yeah, so at the swim, you'll want to take your goggles, your swim cap, your timing chip, whatever. If you're wearing a wetsuit, your wetsuit. You'll be wearing whatever you're wearing underneath your wetsuit. If you're not wearing a wetsuit, then obviously you don't need to bring your wetsuit. And then remember, you'll probably still maybe want to have, some water, and something to eat, because by the time, since you've woken up, it's going to be a couple hours before you actually get in the water. You will have gone to transition. There'll be some waiting time. So you'll probably want something to eat or some kind of fuel before that. So, question, how many water bottles do people usually bring? Again, that's going to be dependent on kind of your hydration and whether you intend to use like the water on the run course or whatnot. But I personally would have 2 water bottles on my bike, and then at least 1, if not 2, in transition. But I like to hydrate a lot. And like I said, I also like to rinse my feet off. So that's what I would usually do, is 2 on the bike, and 2 in transition. Because again, if you haven't listened to the bike one, the place where most people, if you're going to get dehydrated, you're going to get dehydrated on the bike. No aid stations on the bike. So make sure you're practicing getting your water bottle out of the cage while you're riding. But there's not going to be any water on the bike. So that answers. And then, okay, I'm going to read this question. Is the transition close time the time you have to be out of transition on your way to swim and no re-entry? until you are done with the swim, or is that the time that entrance to transition ends, like the doors close then? Great question. I got it. It means, so transition closing means you have to be out of transition on your way to the swim, meaning you can't come back in until after you're done with the swim. So like for international, it closes at 5:45. So you have to be out of transition by 5:45, not into transition, and then you can be there till 6:30 or whatever. So 5:45 is when everybody has to be out of transition. And thinking about it, and that, so like for the international, the race starts at 6 a.m. So pretty soon, like within 20 minutes or whatever it is, you're going to start to have people coming into transition. So they don't want people setting up while racers start coming through. Same thing with the sprint. 8 a.m. means you have to have everything set up and out, and you won't come back till after you get in the swim. Hopefully that answers it. So the question is, what time have the first timers in the past gotten into the water? And that's, it is varied every single year. And they have tried multiple different places, because it's, and so they try to balance, the one of not having a lot of people that are going to swim over top the first timers, but then also not, usually not being the very last wave. I was trying to see if they had the timings from last year up. I think I had it on one of my maybe the last clinic, but it's really varied. You're not going to be the first. So like international starts at 6 a.m. My guess, in a total guess, is it's going to be closer to like 7:15, 7:20 for the international. And then if the, for example, the sprint race starts at 8:08, or at least that's the time it started last year. I believe it was closer to like 9:05 or maybe even like 9:15 or so for the sprint. And for the sprint, the one thing is there's the triple challenge, which are people that are doing the super sprint, international, and sprint. So they'll always be the last wave that gets into the water. Yeah, so it's really varied. And I think last year, a lot of people, and this was, I can't even tell you, last year, like a lot of people switched into their age group, and then the first timers actually went before the age groupers. And so it was the whole thing. So, I think the bottom line is time goes way faster than you think it will. And as I've talked about in past clinics, the head referee last year kind of chimed in on it, that as long as you're progressing forward in the swim in a meaningful, kind of way, which it doesn't take much, they are going to do everything for you to finish the swim. So not worrying about how much time you have to finish the swim, because you'll be good as long as you're just moving forward. And great point. Last year there was no swim, unfortunately. That is very true. So last year they did have to cancel the swim due to very high waves. So it was a bike run. But I feel good about this year that weather will cooperate. And that is not usual, has not happened a lot. Okay, let's see. Let me catch up on some of is there a different colored swim cap for first timers? Yes, your swim cap will be a very specific color. Every wave has a different swim cap color, so it will be a different color. And the question is, even though transition closes at 5:45, you won't get into the water until 7-ish. Yes, and this is where I talk about, I know it sounds like a lot of time, but I promise you it will not be. One, they do a lot of pre-race things. And then you'll have waves go off. You will be lining up in the corral for your to get in the water at least 30 minutes ahead of time. And so then
so yes, there will be a waiting period. You can watch the waves going off ahead of you. We will have a first timer specific area. If you want to come hang out, sit down in, there'll be places that have water and bananas and such, though I wouldn't depend on that. There's bathrooms. So there's a lot going on that it's not going to seem as long as it sounds. But yes, that is also one of the things about doing, I don't know that it's the world's largest anymore, but it's top 3. There's a lot of waves. Let's see. Great question. So, if you are doing the sprint, you do not have to, so the transition opens at 5:45 and then it closes again. I'm sorry, transition opens at 4 a.m. and then it closes again at 5:45 a.m. International, you have to be there during that time. If you are in the sprint, you do not have to come during that time. The transition will reopen at 6:30. So that's where then you'll have to enter up on the north, like east side of transition. It's not difficult. It'll be very clear how to get in there. It will reopen at 6:30 and close again at 8 a.m. So sprint, you won't have to get there. The earliest that you'd want to get there is 6:30. And unless there's a reason for you to get there earlier, like somebody you know is racing or something, the international, I would not come early. Come at when the sprint reopens at 6:30. So hopefully that makes sense. All right. I think that's pretty much what I have. So pop any questions. If there's any last minute questions, please put them in there. I put my email in here. And if you email me and for some reason I don't get back to you, just send a nudge email. There's a lot of random emails, and so I'm sorry if I missed anything. So don't hesitate to be like, what's up? You didn't answer this. So, but any questions, happy to try to help. Facebook page has all of the, there's people talking about swims and stuff. And then the first timers page has all of the old videos. And I will post this one soon. But if there's nothing else, then we will see everybody in 3 weeks for basically race day prep. And there we go. So, all right. Well, I hope everybody has a good day and a good rest of your evening and happy training. And we'll see everyone soon.